All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I'll welcome you all to the March 2024 meeting of the Davis Police Accountability Commission. I am grateful to y'all for bearing with us for a little bit of our technical difficulties earlier this evening. Well, number one, I'll hope that our last two commission members will join us pretty soon here, who are running a little bit late, but maybe starting at the opposite end, we'll do a roll call just to make sure folks' microphones are working. Commissioner Bliss.
Here.
Commissioner Myers.
Here.
Commissioner Sherman.
Here.
Commissioner Canning.
Here.
Myself here, and like I said, we're waiting on, I believe, Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald and Vice Chair Griswold. Let's see. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve today's agenda? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? All those
Aye.
all those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, agenda approved. Brief announcements from staff. Kelly. Brief announcements from commission colleagues.
Yeah, I just want to mention to the commission that we sent, I think 2 months ago, we sent a one-page set of suggestions for an amendment to the surveillance ordinance. And I've talked to several of the city council members who responded positively. Kelly ran it past the chief of police, who didn't have any serious questions about it that I remember you said last month. And today, when I talked to Mayor Chapman, he said that he'd be happy to bring it up as part of the agenda. It, of course, has to go through. It's going to be probably reviewed by the city attorney and also by Mike, the city manager, whatever his name is, right? And then it'll come to the city council. I've had very positive conversations with folks about it. So I think eventually we'll see it in the next few months get added as an amendment. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Any further commissioner announcements? If not, I will, I took a moment to acknowledge the fact that we were in Black History Month at our last meeting, so I certainly don't want to fail in recognizing that this month is Women's History Month. And I am, as I am beginning, I guess, the second or third, depending on how you count it, term as chair, I want to, pay tribute to our very first chair, Judith McBride, who's no longer a member of the commission, but had the unenviable task of being our first person heading up the ship here on top. And so, I really learned so much from working with Judith and her experience in police training and that system in that process. Of course, in between the times that I've been chair, we had our second woman chair of this commission, who I assume is going to burst through the doors any second now, but Cecilia Escamilla Greenwald, who as longtime observers of this commission will know, has focused a lot of her attention and efforts on the outreach responsibilities of the commission, and has really worked to make sure that we are, staying connected and looking forward, or looking to outreach to folks who might not normally be aware of what's going on with the commission and what's going on with city business. And of course, we've had a lot of interesting technological difficulties aside from that today, but I also want to, particularly with one of them having just walked in, pay tribute to our women who served as vice chair. First, the commissioner who served with me for 2 years as vice chair, Commissioner Bliss, who brings a great deal of experience with neighborhood court and things that are in the system of trying to divert people away from the harsher systems of law enforcement. And so we've been strengthened as a commission by her experience. I'm really glad for that. And of course, our newest vice chair, Vice Chair Griswold, as you've heard before, is bringing to us, the experience of two Ps, both the public defender and the pastor. And I'm grateful to be working with her in this year to come. Anyway, that's my announcement. It is Women's History Month, in case you are unaware. Let's see, our council liaison. I knew she was not going to be here because there's a Phoenix Coalition event going on. But anyway, public comment on non-agenda items. This is, of course, a time where you can address the commission on items that are not on our agenda. Of course, for things that are on our agenda, there will be a public comment section for you to address us at that time. It was my first meeting, or at least first meeting for a while as chair. So I hope y'all will forgive me for not reminding folks that public comment is 3 minutes here in this commission. And we will, though politely, ask you to wrap up your comment if you go over that 3 minutes. But with that, I'll open up the opportunity for general public comment if there is any. Not seeing a throng of people rush to the podium. I do just want to briefly acknowledge, I know that there were some folks who sent us emails, and I'm sure, colleagues took time to take a look at that in advance of this meeting. Consent calendar. Does anyone want to make a motion for approval of our February minutes? Or make a suggestion to correction for our February minutes? Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Minutes approved. All right. Police auditor update. Mike, take it away. The other Mike, whose last name we don't have as much trouble remembering.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you all, at least over Zoom. So yeah, with regard to an update, first, I have to say that what I was hoping to be able to talk about today, we're not going to be able to because the audit on hiring and recruiting is still in process. I received a feedback from the chief with a number of comments last Thursday, which didn't give us time to consider and incorporate those comments and then get the report through the rest of the machinery that it needs to go through in time for your Monday meeting, for today's meeting. So I expect that we'll be able to respond to those comments that the chief had and be with you in person to present the audit report next month. So that's where we are there. I guess I'll just go around the world of reform and law enforcement and some new ideas in the time that I have remaining at a very high level. One is I've been intrigued by an initiative that's been going on in Georgia, of all places, for a year or so, and that is with regard to use of deadly force. The general training, the universal training throughout the state of California and throughout the United States has been that when you feel like you need to use deadly force, that you aim for what they call center mass and you do what you can to, quote, stop the threat. And, over the years that I've been doing this work, I've often got the question from individuals who've asked, well, why can't the officers, if they feel like they need to use deadly force, why can't they shoot the individual in the arm or the leg, which would stop them, but then it would less likely kill them? And the stock answer I got whenever I asked that question from police was, one, we're not good enough shots to do that. Two, it would not be an effective way to train. And therefore, we're going to continue to do that. And the reason this initiative in Georgia is so interesting is that there is a chief in Georgia who has now started to train his officers under certain circumstances to try to shoot an individual in the arm and leg instead of shooting them in a more vital part of the body. So we'll see how that goes. But it just shows you that, people are thinking outside the box, even law enforcement at times. He has been subjected to a lot of ridicule and criticism for his wacky idea by the more traditional arms of law enforcement, but we'll see how that works out. The second thing I wanted to bring to your attention has to do with San Quentin Prison. Robert, you've been to San Quentin Prison?
Many times.
All right. San Quentin Prison is going Scandinavian on us, which is an interesting approach. Governor Newsom has approved and authorized that at least some parts of the infamous San Quentin Prison be converted to a Scandinavian model. And what that means is focusing on creating spaces within the prison that look more like condos and apartments and look less like the traditional prisons with the iron bars, et cetera. And already seen some photos. LA Times did a big story on that a couple months ago, and we'll see how that progresses. There's a lot of pushback by some, that don't want, quote, prisoners to be, serving out their sentences in country club environments. But there was also a lot of support for this initiative, including the CCPOA, who is behind it 100%. So we'll see which is the union for the
That's because
correctional officers.
they get San Quentin. I'll tell you that right off the bat. They've always been very involved in making sure that San Quentin doesn't close. A lot of people in the Bay Area, a lot of volunteers at San Quentin. It's an interesting place for a lot of reasons. But go ahead, Mike. I just wanted to
No,
add.
yeah. And in fact, some of, that was where death row was for a while and all that. So now that we have suspended the execution of the death penalty in the state, there are some space to convert those modules. And I think the governor thought it was a good symbolic place to start the reform because of its notorious history. The last thing that I want to talk about is another bill that's been introduced into the legislature for this session, and it has to do with an issue that has presented itself in a couple cases I've actually looked at in other jurisdictions. But there have been times in the past in which officers have been involved in deadly force incidents, and an individual has been shot and killed as a result of the deadly force incident. But the detectives who are investigating the case will then go to the home of the individual who's been shot and try to get information from family members. And there is one particular attorney that has recommended to his clients that if they do that, they should do it under sort of stealth conditions and not let the family members know that their son usually a son, has expired at the hands of police until they get information about the individual that can be useful for purposes of defending the litigation and any lawsuit. And so that approach has been undertaken by some police departments, not well received by others, and certainly not well received by a number of advocates who think that that is a low-handed, underhanded way to get information and just not right, where a family member who has just lost somebody and doesn't know it is now pouring their hearts out about an individual. And then later at the end of the interview being told, oh, by the way, your son was killed tonight at the hands of police. So the bill is intended to essentially provide sort of like Miranda rights to family members, or at least that's the pattern. The latest draft of the bill would require detectives to advise the family members that somebody had been shot and killed by police before questioning them about the history, background, or any other information they want from the family about the son who's just been killed. So we'll see how that goes. I don't know if it's got a whole lot of support, but it has the support of at least one legislator. And I'm sure that after tomorrow's election, things will get into motion again with the legislative session, and we'll see how that goes. So those are the three items that I present to you, just to keep you abreast of what's going on in the world of law enforcement. Happy to answer any questions about those topics or any other topics you think would be helpful to talk about.
Thank you, Mike. Questions? Cecilia?
Mike, thank you for that update. Can you please share with us, does the Police Officers Association support that bill?
Which one? The bill? No, they're not supporting the bill. As far as I know, they're not supporting the bill. I don't know whether they've even taken a position on it, so I don't know the answer to that, Cecilia.
Okay, thank you.
Robert?
Yeah, Mike, I read an article earlier this week, or in the last 10 days, about prone position and the use of it in restraining individuals. Is there been how do the police currently train typically? What does post, how do they train for restraint using prone position?
Yeah, the training tends to be that if you're going to be using a hobble or any kind of wrap that attaches the legs and arms, that you've got to, you've got to watch the individual, observe them, monitor them, don't leave them alone. And then if possible, move them to a side position, which is less likely going to cause respiratory issues or respiratory distress. It's interesting, the whole concept of positional asphyxia, which was a term that lawyers representing police departments love to use, which was intended to explain why people who are hobbled and put in that position sometimes die. That has been found by DSM no longer to be a useful medical term. And they have removed that term from the parlance of medical expertise in the state of California and nationwide as a result of work of a reformer that did the study, did the work, and talked to experts. And that term is no longer in favor of being used by the medical examiners in the state of California.
Thank you.
Mike, may I ask a question? This is John Myers.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any, if I just Google that Georgia police story, will it come up, do you think?
Yeah, the name of the chief, and unfortunately, he's now announced his retirement. He just announced it. His name is Dekmar, D-E-K-M-A-R. And if you Google shoot in the arm or shoot the extremities in Dekmar in Georgia, you should get it.
Thank you, sir.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question about the audit. Will you include or is it proper to include the questions that the chief has posed to you along with your report as you next month?
Yeah, I think it really aren't questions so much as some changed circumstances since we started the audit, in that the challenges apparently have increased with regard to trying to keep staffing levels to where they need to be. But we will reference the input from the chief somehow in the report.
Yeah, I guess the question is, were they substantive or just sort of more I think you've answered it, so thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from the commission? If not, we'll move to public comment. If there are any folks who want to speak in public comment on this item, now would be the time. If not, we'll move back to the commission. Any final questions or comments for Mike? Other than that, thank you, Mike.
Thank you, sir.
Let's see. Let's move now to regular item number 7. So, y'all will recall that we had a conversation in our last month's commission meeting about the use of facial recognition technology in law enforcement, about the municipalities in California and other, parts of the country that had pursued bans on the use of that technology, in the context of law enforcement. We discussed some of the reliability issues in our last meeting and some of the overall privacy concerns. But I thought, those, particularly since we don't have, some folks will remember, we used to have a member named Sean Brooks on this commission, who was our sort of resident tech expert. He's no longer a member of this commission, unfortunately. Evan and I had a chance to have a conversation. So he is doing well. I can report to Mary and Cecilia that he is doing well. I wanted to give a little bit more heft to our conversations on this topic, particularly if we are considering a recommendation of the city council. And so I'm very glad that when we prayed for heft, we had those prayers answered with Brian, who will be presenting to us and who is the executive director of Secure Justice, is one of our sibling commission folks, is the chair of the City of Oakland's Privacy Advisory Commission. For folks who followed the legislative path of the surveillance technology ordinance here in the city of Davis, Brian was certainly a big part of that, and we're very grateful for that as well. We're glad to hear from him present to us today. Obviously, there'll be an opportunity for questions from the commission after that, but welcome, Brian.
I'm okay. Sorry. Let's drive up from the bay, got to stretch my legs. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. And I should have taken advantage of public comment, just if I can have just 10 seconds. It's even better about positional asphyxia. It's not that it's been completely rejected by the medical establishment. It's no longer.
Sorry, Brian, can you lift your?
It's no longer admissible as a defense in civil lawsuits. We had the pleasure of working with the Alex Quinto family, which he died from that. Yeah, as your chair said, I'm Brian Hofer. I've been the sole chair of the City of Oakland's Privacy Commission, which I helped create. We subsequently created our surveillance ordinance after we formed the Privacy Commission. I've had a hand in drafting 6 of the 8 in California, including yours. I formed Secure Justice a few years after the Privacy Commission got started and took over my life, and decided, as the volunteer not getting paid in a room full of everybody else getting paid, maybe I could try to make a career out of it. And so we consult with municipalities all across the country now as they deal with similar issues like you, emerging technologies, police use of tech, and smart city applications as well. I've helped consult with the other 3 and help establish the other 3 privacy commissions in California. So I appreciate that you guys are really focusing on this. And Sean Brooks is a name for a blast from the past. I remember working with him as well. That was great. So let me give you a kind of a background here, or a kind of current status. There is no federal authorization or prohibition and I'm going to say FRT, facial recognition technology, if you don't mind, as to either private party use or law enforcement use. Several attempts have been introduced to try to regulate, haven't even been introduced. With the gridlock at the federal level, I don't expect that to change anytime soon. In California, unfortunately, we have the same status. Nothing on the books. We did have a 3-year moratorium on the use of FRT on body cameras that expired 2 years ago. A bill has been introduced this year, working its way through the committee process, I think next week, to renew for another 3 years, the same idea. Last year, there was a half-baked attempt to regulate FRT for a number of reasons, many red flags, technical problems that were just not addressed. The civil liberties community advocates like Secure Justice, we opposed that bill, and it was defeated. The same author is attempting a much more narrow bill this year. It's like 2 sentences long that essentially says an FRT match cannot be the basis for a probable cause arrest or warrant. Our concern is that's it. There's nothing else in the bill. There's no transparency, no accountability mechanisms, no other safeguards. And also, which I'll expand upon a little bit later, every single policy I've ever read in the country already contains that provision, and it's not adequately safeguarding our civil liberties. Across the country, 2 states have banned the technology, 2 counties in 2 different states. 20 cities overall. And the city of Portland, Oregon has the sole status of having banned both private and municipal side use of FRT. In California, Oakland, San Francisco, Berkeley, Alameda, and Santa Cruz have all banned the use of FRT on the government side. I would argue Davis is pretty ideologically aligned with those jurisdictions. And like Oakland, Berkeley, and San Francisco, we all share a similar surveillance ordinance. To our knowledge, unlike London or Beijing, US police are not yet using FRT for real-time surveillance. At all levels here, federal, state, local law enforcement, it's primarily used as an investigative tool. There's two primary categories: one to many, which is when you compare a photo of a potential suspect to an entire database looking for a match. The other is one-to-one. You might be using it yourself to unlock your iPhone with your own face. On the private side, shopping malls, concert venues, stadiums, some schools, real-time use has been occurring without regulation or oversight. Previously, FRT searches were mostly confined to existing mugshot or booking databases kept by the sheriffs. With the rise of Clearview AI and other similar vendors, there's now a wide access to many commercial databases. Police also have access to the DMV photo databases. And so they have a really significant treasure trove of photos at the moment. There are many concerns regarding the use of FRT, and it's not just accuracy. It's well established that FRT is less accurate with darker skin tones. Until last month, 100% of all known proven false arrests due to FRT were African American. Last month, a white male was wrongfully arrested, and he's alleged in his lawsuit that he just filed that he was gang raped in jail. He was basically there for one night due to a mistaken identity. And I could fill your inbox with a lot of horror stories, but I just, I kind of ask you to remember that, when you inevitably run into somebody that's going to say, well, as long as this technology saves just one life, it's worth it. On balance, what we've seen is it's definitely far more negative than helpful. Although current testing by NIST shows that most current generation algorithms are 90+% accurate, that is terribly misleading. NIST tests FRT like when you're standing at the DMV getting your driver's license photo. You're perfectly still, you have perfect lighting, you're facing the camera while standing at an ideal distance for a high resolution photo. That's never happened once in police law enforcement scenarios ever. And that's a big reason why the earlier state proposal that I was talking about was defeated. Generally, vendors recommend a confidence rate where they think, we're pretty confident this is the match at 85% or higher. Some vendors have now suggested 95%. In all the litigation and audits we've ever seen, no police department's even close to that. They're dropping it down to 70, 60, 50% because they just want to generate leads. I've only personally been able to examine San Francisco, which might sound weird since they have a ban. They've been violating it. We'll be reading about our lawsuit next month. But we've had a couple whistleblowers give us documents, and it's a pretty decent amount. And so far, not one match, not a single match has ever occurred. So this technology, it's just not proving itself. It's not ready for the real world. Jurisdictions that are using FRT in the lower threshold are attempting to justify it by saying we have a human in the loop. There's a fail safe. After the algorithm gives us 6, 7, 8 matches, the human looks at it and says yay or nay. Maybe somewhere it's working, but as of right now, 100% of all the known proven false arrests, there's been a human in the chain, every single one. Every single one of those use policies also said FRT shall not be the basis for an arrest. So these safeguards are not working. Social scientists have proven, and this is not unique to FRT, that people, including police, trust surveillance technology to be more accurate than their own eyes. We call this automation bias. One of my advisory team members like to say, I wish people knew that the science isn't so sciencey. We've seen hair microscopy, fingerprints, bite marks, all sorts of things that we thought were infallible. As we've gotten more sophisticated testing have shown they are really unreliable and should not be used when taking away somebody's liberty. Police are also sort of reversing how the process should have worked by putting FRT matches into a lineup for an eyewitness to then identify so they can say, this was confirmed by a human eyewitness. But that's suggestive. It's leading them to say this must be a suspect here already, when 100% of all of those could be wrong. So it's already influencing this potential eyewitness. And you end up with this house of cards that's built upon this faulty premise that never should have went anywhere. And we end up throwing somebody in a cage. Not only the trauma that person suffers, but the increase in taxpayer liability that occurs. Police have been known to use Photoshop to cut and paste from multiple images. They're even using old-fashioned police sketch artists to fill in missing pieces, almost as if they have a responsibility to defend the algorithm rather than the civil liberties and justice. While many might defend using FRT narrowly for at-risk searches and active shooter scenarios, the question does become a bit more philosophical. What kind of society do you want to live in? In order to find grandma with dementia in a large crowd after she wanders off, or identify youth being sexually trafficked, you essentially need a database with every single face in it, updated every year as we age, in order to maximize that utility. It's what noted FRT researcher, formerly at Georgetown Law, Claire Garvey, calls a perpetual lineup, that we are all essentially guilty until proven innocent because we're in this criminal database. I could fill your inbox, again, not unique to FRT, but I could fill your inbox with horror stories of people that are being caught in geofence warrants and all this other surveillance technology and FRT that's placing them at the scene of a crime, but it's just a pure coincidence. And they're going to jail. They're having to defend themselves, spend tens of thousands of dollars and years and stress and nightmares trying to clear their name. And as this technology becomes more ubiquitous and clearly is unreliable, this problem is going to explode. Please suggest that the time savings of using FRT to process hours of video in mere minutes may itself be life-saving. And while theoretically true, it doesn't solve any of the known concerns I just stated, nor does it acknowledge history. I challenge you to identify a single piece of technology you've ever heard of that is versatile and has been successfully confined to just one or two non-controversial uses for any length of time. License plate readers were introduced in the late 70s for one purpose: stolen vehicle recovery, to overcome the hiding in plain sight phenomenon. Today, most of the use policies I work on contain 20 to 25 different specific use cases. Drone use has exploded far beyond what I could have imagined. And FRT, I think, is arguably more versatile, especially when you consider that the infrastructure, the camera networks are already essentially in place. Now you just got to apply the code, flip the switch. Like ALPR and other technologies, I'm not going to mislead. FRT has produced some legitimate successes, but it's such a statistically significant, insignificant manner that when compared to these known abuses we've already seen, and I think it's reasonable to suggest there's more in the shadows we haven't yet discovered, on balance, it weighs in favor of prohibition instead of regulation. U.S. courts have long held that we have the right to be anonymous in public. Our state has a statutory right to privacy. These rights are clearly infringed upon if we were subject to FRT use as we move about our daily lives. And finally, this is a failure of the advocacy community. I'm really trying to raise the alarm bells. Please consider identity theft. As we use more and more biometric surveillance technology, identity theft, I think, is going to be crippling. I've had credit card identity theft. I lost over 200 points of my credit score overnight. It took me 2.5 years to crawl out of a hole. I had an 800 number to call. Visa could shut down the cards and put a freeze on my other credit cards. Who do you call when they take your face print? Because in order to get the utility that we just described, all of our faces have to be in a lineup. That means there's a face print stored. And once it gets hacked, and it always eventually will get hacked, your face prints are going to be out there sold for pennies on the dollar, just like my credit information was. And there's not a lot you're going to be able to do. You're not going to be able, you can't replace what is unique to you. And that's why identity theft, I think, is going to be one of the biggest nightmares. If you do consider language, just a couple suggestions. Consider a ban. Resolutions are unenforceable, not worth the effort. If you really want to make it meaningful and ensure accountability by ordinance with a private right of action and attorney's fees, if you just ban it so narrowly, the language says like just, Davis PD can't use it. That doesn't prevent outsourcing to a third party, whether it's private or public. And that will certainly occur if that loophole exists. In the Bay Area, we address both our own use internally and also prohibit outsourcing. If you favor prohibition, I suspect you might have the same opinion as me. I'm worried about the outward facing use on the public. I don't care about user authentication. If you want to unlock your own phone with your face, go ahead. San Francisco, as the first city to ban it, did not consider that. So they had to go back and rewrite their ordinance to allow for user authentication and even a subpart to acquire iPhones. Every police department I work with today uses iPhones. So we had to write the language into like Oakland, Alameda, and Berkeley, which came later, to say, okay, you can acquire these. It comes pre-bundled. I know you can't, disable that. You can only use it solely for your own user authentication. And I don't think that's, that wasn't controversial. But thanks for listening. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Robert?
Thanks for the presentation. I really appreciate it. You just mentioned police use of iPhones. Can police, or do police, or have you seen instances where the police are using iPhone technology to get into people's phones, that they are detained and arrested, and then they take the phone and then have them, in other words, they use their own, the person's phone is, like
I don't
facial
think
recognition.
I don't think you can use a phone to crack another iPhone.
No, it's
most-
use their own phone to get into their phone. Are police allowed to do that? In other words, if the person has facial recognition to get into their iPhone, can the police then tap it, hold it up, and get their?
Are you saying, can they essentially compel them to use their face? So there's a split in the courts, and there's different splits on different issues. There was the fingerprint, because that's also biometric. There's the passcode, which is stored in your brain, and then there's the Face ID. And there's a split in the courts on both sides, saying that the Fourth Amendment only protects against me having to reveal my passcode. Whereas, if I'm unconscious or you got me in handcuffs, you can put my fingerprint on to unlock or use my face. So we'll see what the higher courts end up doing with that.
What a fun system. Any other questions? I think you mentioned that it was Portland that was the city that banned it across the board. Do you know anything about like what their motivation was in terms of wanting to go beyond law enforcement use?
Yeah. And brilliant creative lawyering. We'll see if it ever gets tested in court and survives. But they actually had a real world case study to look at. There was liquor stores, this chain of liquor stores in Portland that was using facial recognition to identify and essentially prevent certain individuals from opening the stores. And the legal theory rests on the ADA, American with Disabilities Act, that in a place of public accommodations, such as this, where you can't, if you could be a private entity, but if you're holding out services to the public, you're not supposed to discriminate. Of course, the U.S. Supreme Court is whittling that away with some of these crazy decisions that have been coming out the last couple of years. But the theory is that it is discriminatory and therefore prohibited by the ADA. So that's what they've based their legal opinion on. It hasn't been tested yet in court.
Thank you. Other questions? Cecilia.
Yeah, you mentioned that Oakland, San Francisco, and Berkeley have banned it, right? I'm just curious to know.
And Alameda,
Oh,
Santa
and
Cruz,
Alameda, okay.
California.
I imagine there was a lot of support, but did you all come across a lot of opposition to that?
Fair, obviously a very important, fair question. It's been really weird. And I think the timing made a big difference. And because I do this around the country, and I was part of the Portland effort and some others. Tech itself has been unbelievably quiet. The police unions have been muted in their opposition, like grumble, but we're not going to really fight. I think a lot of it was just reading the political winds and saying, like, the community is clearly not in favor of this today. Maybe we'll pick that fight 10 years down the road. But even tech itself has been kind of reading those tea leaves and not getting involved.
Thank you.
Kind of the process of getting a ban passed. Like, one, would we be able to like use one of these other ordinances or bans as a draft?
Yep.
And I mean, that's what I'm wondering. Maybe that's more even just for us. I'm like, great, I'm in. How do we make this happen?
Yeah.
Like, what are the next
yeah,
steps? What does that look like? It's
Yeah, I can send you guys a draft ordinance. My understanding, you guys work like most municipalities, you need a council champion to introduce it. You yourselves cannot enact an ordinance. So,
Mhm.
Find a council champion, just like the surveillance ordinance was introduced by the council. And there's a community coalition with some of these friends that I haven't seen since 2018 that supported it. And that's how it went forward. And just to even further expand, none of the votes were close. They were all unanimous yeses.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? If not, I will now open up to, and I'll briefly need the podium, but we'll open up to public comment where folks who are not a part of the commission can bring forward their questions should they so choose. Welcome.
Good evening, Dean Johansson. Excuse me. Most of you know me. I was in 2018 part of that evolution of the ordinance that Brian just spoke to. Francesca Brian gave me a draft. On New Year's Day, I sat there and penciled out what would become the ordinance. It was Francesca that took it and ran it across the touchdown line. So, but I wanted to speak to one aspect of what Brian mentioned. He talked about the shadows and what goes on in the real world. Now, having worked as a prosecutor in 2 counties, public defender in 2 counties, including San Francisco, and a private attorney for 10 years, and civil rights and that sort of thing. Excuse me. I can tell you from the other side of the shadows that there is a huge problem with this technology. I have been involved, I've had over 100 jury trials, and I can tell you from, empirical evidence, as close as you can get, that everything from DNA to fingerprints to this facial recognition now is faulty. And you don't hear the stories. You don't hear them from the other side because there isn't the opportunity. The many people that are in prison right now for things that they did not do. I'll just give you, I just keep thinking about this one example. Fingerprint evidence has been around probably the longest. There are examples of people that have the same fingerprint and nobody talks about it. My ex-wife is a nurse and she was temporarily over here at the Woodland Hospital, and they have this technology so that nurses can't withdraw, you probably know about this, Robert, medication, because the idea is that you could have a nurse, addicted to heroin. And so here she goes along and whammo, she's trying to take out medication that's already been taken out, and the technology is telling her that she's already done this. What turns out there are two nurses at Woodland at the same time that have identical fingerprints. But you don't hear these stories, just like you won't hear the stories of those that, are convicted with facial recognition. Thank you. Guess my time's up.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, Greg Crawford on my own behalf. I mostly wanted to make a very brief comment to echo my concerns about the reliability of FRT technologies. In particular, I liked that the speaker mentioned that many of the studies that have been done on it have been unreliable. In a lot of field conditions, there's a lot of factors which make it very difficult to get a precise enough identification from a person. If I were to take a picture of one of you, these are all very controlled conditions. You're staring right at me. I can get it nice and close with a good zoom lens. There's good lighting. I probably could get a good match. In practice, that's not really what happens though. In a crime scene, you have people who are looking kind of shifty, they're not really looking right at the surveillance camera that hasn't been updated in 20 years. It's dark. Many opportunities for misidentification purely because of technological limitations. Many of these studies tend to assume that all of the conditions are perfect and they're not honest about their limitations. And so I want the commission to keep that in mind as they're developing their recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
I'm Luana Villanueva. I have a telephone here that doesn't know me most of the time. I tried doing the fingerprint thing. I apparently don't have fingerprints. Maybe that's a good thing for me. I don't know. But the reliability of this blows me away. And to hear what you were talking about with people having the same fingerprints and I don't have any, this is ridiculous. I mean, at least the phone doesn't think I have any. I don't know. So I am really concerned about lack of privacy. And I just can't see the whole technology thing being a good thing. It's not. And I hope you guys express that really well to the city council. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Francesca Wright. I want to thank you all for bringing this up. It's time, and we know enough now to know that it's a technology that will cause more harm than good. The numbers for racial disparity, this is a racist tool. It hasn't, if they said that if those statistics happened only with white-skinned people, we would not have this technology. And I'm a community activist, and I can tell you that I will commit to work with outreach in the community when you get that sample ordinance, and spread the word, because it is the right thing to do. there's the issues of privacy, there's the issues of disparities and the results that come out of it. And we can do so much better. Enforcement for a crime is not to go fishing for potentials of people that you could blame for a crime. And this is a fishing expedition that our government should not be engaging. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? I feel like I saw a question hand earlier in the conversation. So I want to make sure there's an opportunity to handle that.
Alright, since you're kind of calling me out here. No, I my question really was, I was a bit curious as to how the that legal theory rested on ADA. I'm assuming it goes something like, because you were giving public service, in this case access to a liquor store in Portland, therefore, you know, using facial recognition would be discriminatory. Honestly, I don't see the connection to ADA and how that operates, because it wouldn't impair someone's technical accessibility to a liquor store, other than, you know, being caught up in a crime later on if there's someone were to accuse you of stealing some product from said liquor store. There's kind of an odd little string there. But other than that, I will say that if this commission is to make a recommendation for the ordinance of the city of Davis, make sure that this ordinance is airtight, and so that if in the future 10, 20, 25 years down the road, you have a city council that is less than friendly to this ordinance or wishes to loosen the so-called screws on this ordinance, make sure that it is airtight so that cannot occur, so you can continue to keep the privacy and general safety of the citizens of Davis at mind for decades to come.
Thank you. Welcome.
My name is Evan Wallace. And we were talking about maybe a ban, or having a template for the ban that was mentioned before. And I actually have a template ban that Brian himself sent us from Alameda. And it basically, the gist of it is that the city, which is defined as any department, agency, bureau, or subordinate division of the city of Alameda, essentially is prohibited from obtaining, retaining, requesting, accessing, or using any face recognition technology, or any information obtained from face recognition technology, with associated penalties under that. But it basically stops them from the law enforcement from using the technology and from getting it from private businesses. Like if Target or something has surveillance and they see someone who they suspect is a shoplifter and they run that through a match, that could be cause for the police to come and arrest them for that. And this would ban that as well, so they wouldn't be able to access it from other businesses or other places where there's surveillance. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All righty then, I will bring it back to the commission. Brian, is there anything from public comment that you wanted to address or respond to? It's fine if you don't.
I'll just say real quickly, the ADA memo was legally privileged, so obviously I wasn't privy to it, but the part that was shared in public is, and I think it's solid for today. We'll see about in the future, but with the known error rate for darker skin tones, that was the discriminatory part. How's, again, is it the best nexus to the ADA? Hasn't been tested in court. We'll see it.
Thank you. All right, commission colleagues, where do we want to go from here? Any?
Yeah, I would suggest that we, I don't know if we want to go this route, maybe form a subcommittee to put something together and bring it back to the commission, so we could then make a recommendation to council on this. unless we want to, you know, because I think it would take a while to discuss it here. It might be good to dissect it first with a subcommittee and then bring it back.
Yeah, it seems like we have at the very least some or perhaps several, templates or places where we can take inspiration from. And so a subcommittee taking a look into that, I think would be a good way for us to get moving. Any other thoughts about how to move forward?
I just have a question. I want to make sure because I wasn't here last time. Currently, this technology is not used by our police department and there are no plans. So this is getting ahead of the ball. I just want to make sure I'm approaching this in the correct way. Thanks.
And it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but it's my understanding that that was how it was approached in the other municipalities, that it was, municipalities where they weren't using it currently, where they had no immediate plans to use it, but it was an idea of let's get ahead of this before this, we see some of those troublesome statistics in our own community. Other thoughts about how to proceed forward? Okay, individuals who want to be on that subcommittee, Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald, other enthused volunteers. Of course, I'll throw my own self in there as well. Any others? Commissioner Myers? All right, I think we're limited to 4, right? Or 3. All right, that's it. That's the subcommittee. All right, any further comments or questions on this item? All right, well, thanks. Thank you, Brian, so much for your participation and for making the trek over from the Bay Area, and for your service and helping us with so many things in the past. All right, we will shift on to item 8, our subcommittee.
Excuse me, Chairman
Yes,
Horn.
I'm sorry.
He said he's going to forward that information to Kelly.
You,
right?
you
The
referring to the
templates?
template? Yeah, I know you have contact with Kelly. That might be the easiest way, but there's a PAC email that goes to all of us. You're probably familiar with those kind of emails, so that can come to that PAC email too as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, so now moving on to item 8, let's see our subcommittee and liaison assignments. I was wondering, Kelly, as I was reading this item earlier in the day, liaison assignments, is it like a council thing? Because we don't really, at least as far as my understanding, we don't really do liaisons.
You're correct. This is wording that goes across commissions, so I can update it next time for this agenda.
Wanted to make sure I wasn't
No, you're not missing anything.
something. Okay. All right. So let's see. Our first is the one that is a one-member committee that I had forgotten that I was a member of the last meeting, and I thankfully did remember this time, and so I did send Kelly a sort of a draft set of the questions. Kelly, I don't know if you're able to bring that up while we're here.
Give me a minute because you sent it right before the meeting and I haven't
Right.
even opened it. So I
Right,
think
okay.
it was a Google Doc.
Yes,
Okay, it's going to take a second. 'cause
Okay, no worries.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, while Kelly's pulling it up, just to sort of widen the lens here, obviously we had this I think it was maybe referenced earlier in this evening's discussion, but we had the series of stabbings in May of last year. Obviously a sort of a once in a lifetime kind of event for our community. 2 people unfortunately died, and 1 person was very seriously injured. And at the time, particularly as a member of the Police Accountability Commission, I heard concerns and questions from just a variety of folks in the community who obviously we're appreciative of the work in significant overtime that the department did during that period of time, but had some concerns about how the situation was handled and if we can learn any lessons from that period of time. And so I think I've brought up that I think there has to be some sort of public setting for at least part of that discussion about what are the lessons learned from that time period. And I think this commission has a a unique opportunity, given what our responsibility is, to begin at least the public, civilian portion of that discussion. And so that's sort of why this is here. I think I was asked to try to summarize some of those questions or concerns. And that's that's what the document that Kelly is trying to pull up. Once she does, I'm interested in seeing if those questions or concerns sort of jive with folks' own understanding. If there are things that we think need to be added here, if there are things that don't really seem like they make any sense. It's very short, so I guess I might as well just go ahead and read through it. Obviously, it would be good just to understand what the department's general overall lessons learned from the incident were. What, beyond us asking you any specific questions, what have you yourself felt like could have been done maybe differently, with the benefit of the understanding and experience that y'all have had thus far. And then there's sort of like two areas of sort of more substantive concern. One sort of surrounding civilian reports. Thanks, Kelly, for correcting that typo. Apparently, I had typed daft questions as the title of this document instead of draft questions. But anyway, there were a bunch of people, obviously, who reported sightings of someone who matched the description of the person who was alleged to have committed those crimes. And a lot of those either were followed up on much later or not followed up on at all, at least, to the understanding of the person who, reported that sighting. And so there's just a number of questions that I think sort of stem from that. Did the mutual aid that the department received from a number of local police departments expand DPD's ability to process those civilian reports? How did DPD decide which reports needed to be followed up on, and obviously, which ones didn't need to be? Did DPD set up a specialized system to receive and process civilian video surveillance materials? I remember at the city update that the council and police department gave during that time, that the department said that because this is a unique incident and we're receiving all of these reports, we're having to kind of surge resources, for lack of a better term, to dispatch and to make sure that those things are being processed. And so I'm looking for a little bit more meat on the bone as to what that looked like and how that was different from how the department handled those things in the past. And then, of course, given that the unhoused population seemed to be the target of these attacks, reports, I think that were maybe mentioned in this commission, if not at city council meetings, of sweeps, for lack of a better term, or other enforcement activity with the department and our unhoused population are concerning to me, and I think other folks as well. And so, a number of questions stemming from that: was DPD involved in the city's outreach effort to unhoused residents? Did DPD detain or arrest unhoused residents as the city was trying to get folks out of unsheltered settings? Anyway, so that's what I could put together preliminarily as a summary of what I recall. This is almost now a year ago, but from what the concerns that I recall people bringing up at the time. But does that sort of jive with people's understanding of what they observed or what they heard from folks, or are there things that we need to add? Commissioner Escamilla Greenwald?
Yeah, Chairman Horton, I also recall people saying that they were concerned, there was concern by people who had I want to say darker skin, but I guess medium toned skin and curly hair. They were concerned that, people of color were being targeted. And I even remember saying, well, they're giving this description and they're really wanting to capture this person to prevent any further stabbings from taking place. And they're saying, but isn't there a way they can be more specific without being so general and targeting a large number of people of color? So I don't know the answer to that question, but I do recall quite a few people bringing that up. And also I wanted to say, I don't know that we're going to get at this time any feedback from DPD because, it's an open case and they just, they've been all over the news that they're going to hearing some point soon. So I don't know if we're just going to hear perhaps more questions or concerns from the public. I don't think we're going to get any feedback from DPD at this time.
Yeah, just in my mindset, it's we're at the public civilian sort of phase of the discussion. It's I think fully unreasonable to expect any sort of substantive response from the department on this issue that's still for lack of a better term an active investigation. Yeah, I think that does completely make sense. And then with regard to your point about targeting people, I remember because the two different and the two different descriptions were fairly similar, but they were distinct in some ways, but the descriptions were so broad. I mean, right, curly hair, there were so many different people, and there were people who I knew just, especially now knowing what the person looked like, didn't really match the description, but because the description was so general, sort of felt this concern that they really couldn't be out and about in public in their own community because they might sort of be seen as the person who might have done this. So yeah, I'm not sure if I have an answer to that either, but I do recall hearing folks concerned about that as well. Other things, yes.
So I'm going to need your help with this because I was out of town, of course, when this happened. But I recall from another meeting, which may or may not be right, that there was a question about the communication from DPD, the delay in getting updates. Wasn't there something about that? Is that vaguely? I mean,
What it was, if I recall correctly, this was around the second stabbing, and it was because the second stabbing had occurred in like the wee hours of the morning, if I recall correctly, in Sycamore Park, which is, as folks know, is a significantly traveled thoroughfare for people who are sending their kids to school. And so the concern was, why wasn't the public, I think, wasn't notified until maybe like 10 o'clock the next morning. And so I think it was, why wasn't there like immediate notification of the public that this thing had happened? I think, or maybe I'm getting that wrong.
I was remembering it more as ongoing updates, but I could be really wrong because
Chairman, I believe that it was ongoing updates and the issue you brought forth about kids, because kids travel through there on their bikes to go to school. And also, because I lived near there when I was in college, there's also some dorms in that area too, in that park, the park nearby there. There's apartments and dorms. And so there was concern that the information didn't get out to the student population, parents, and the public at large quick enough. And why is that? And I know we're not going to hear from them right now, but why did that happen? For what reason did that happen? And what, if any, policies have changed with regards to notifying the public and parents and students? There was a big concern from students at the university. I remember that.
I think I already announced and talked about that.
Sorry, I just want to verify. So the subcommittee on surveillance technology, does that still continue to exist? Or are you feeling that with your memo, it's done? And next month, when we get the surveillance technology annual review, you'll appoint a new subcommittee?
Yeah.
Okay, then I will remove that subcommittee and we'll talk about it next month.
Okay, just one last check, public comment on the subcommittees. Okay, any final comment from the commission? Yes.
The subcommittee on local voices, that just seems to have been hanging forever. Do we get rid of it?
I mean, the main thing is that the actual effort is kind of hanging. And so, you know, you know, we have no updates because there's been no updates on the
I
project.
don't
unfortunately.
anticipate them continuing their tabling until probably spring because this,
So why don't we appoint a new subcommittee? When
we
they-
could, yeah, we could remove it and then, you know, I can check in with them to see if they still want to do, you know, some work
No, I
with
mean, it
us.
just seems like we bring it up, so why not
Right.
do the same
Right.
thing with the surveillance
If
thing?
commission colleagues are okay with that, yeah.
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
be good with dropping that one as
Yeah,
well.
that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from the commission on these subcommittees? All right, then, long range calendar. I feel like there was something I was supposed to mention there, but I've forgotten what it was.
Sorry, did you ask for public comment?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah. Somehow I remembered. Yeah, let's see, anything that folks want to add on to future agendas beyond what we've generally talked about before in previous meetings? All righty, any public comment on long range? All right, anyone want to make a motion for adjournment? Is there a second? All those in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Night, everyone.